Imagine a land of endless rivers, towering mountains, and thick tropical forests, long before it was called Venezuela. A land where the first whispers of humanity echoed, where nomads hunted, fished, and painted their stories on cave walls. What if I told you that the story of this nation begins not with a flag, not with a declaration of independence, but with the footsteps of people who lived here more than 15,000 years ago? Today, we'll journey into the forgotten origins of Venezuela, exploring its first humans, the birth of its people, and the landscapes that shaped them. This is the story you've never been told, until now. Long before Spain's ships ever appeared on the horizon, Venezuela was home to some of the earliest human societies in the Americas. Archaeological evidence suggests that hunter-gatherer groups arrived here during the late Pleistocene, roughly 13,000 to 15,000 years ago. These were hardy people who navigated dense rainforests, crossed rivers, and climbed the Andean foothills, leaving behind stone tools, petroglyphs, and evidence of early settlements. In the north, along the Caribbean coast, these first inhabitants found rich fishing grounds, while inland valleys offered fertile soils and abundant wildlife. They hunted giant sloths, mastodons, and other now-extinct megafauna, slowly adapting to the ever-changing climate of post-Ice Age South America. Their lives were intertwined with nature, and their survival depended on understanding the land in ways modern humans can hardly imagine. By around 5000 BCE, these early peoples had begun to settle more permanently, forming complex communities. They farmed manioc, maize, and other native crops, gradually transitioning from purely nomadic lifestyles to ones that allowed them to shape the land itself. They created pottery, wove textiles, and developed trade networks that connected the mountains, plains, and coastlines, a web of human connection that foreshadowed the rise of the peoples who would one day call themselves Venezuelans. But who were the groups that truly defined pre-Columbian Venezuela? How did they organize? What cultures did they develop? And how did they survive the arrival of foreign explorers centuries later? In the next part, we will explore the indigenous civilizations of Venezuela, their kingdoms, their art, and their way of life, long before the name Venezuela existed. Before the word Venezuela existed, this land was alive with diverse peoples and cultures. These were not mere tribes. They were complex societies with traditions, beliefs, and social systems that had been evolving for thousands of years. From the Caribbean coast to the Amazon basin, from the Orinoco plains to the Andes mountains, the indigenous peoples of Venezuela left a legacy that still echoes today. Among the most prominent groups were the Cumanagotos along the northeast coast, the Caribs who spread across the Caribbean islands, and northern Venezuela, the Arawaks in the western plains, and the Tomoto-Cuicas high in the Andean regions. Each group adapted uniquely to their environment. The Tomoto-Cuicas, for instance, were remarkable engineers and farmers. They built terraced fields on mountain slopes, developed irrigation systems, and stored food in large circular granaries called conucos. Archaeologists have found evidence of permanent villages with stone and adobe houses, showing a high level of social organization centuries before European contact. The Caribs, in contrast, were known as fierce warriors and skilled navigators. Their society was organized around kinship and clan systems, and they were adept at riverine and coastal travel, connecting different regions for trade and cultural exchange. Meanwhile, in the Orinoco plains, the Arawaks established expansive networks of settlements. They cultivated manioc, sweet potatoes, and other crops, and they crafted pottery, woven baskets, and ornaments from shells and bones. Their art and mythology reveal a deep spiritual connection to rivers, forests, and the animals that sustained them. These civilizations were not isolated. Trade routes crisscrossed the land, allowing goods, ideas, and techniques to flow between groups. They developed languages, rituals, and oral histories that defined their identity. It was a time when the people of what would become Venezuela were masters of their land, thriving in harmony with the natural world around them. But all this would change dramatically in the late 15th and early 16th centuries, when distant ships arrived from across the Atlantic, In the next part, we will explore the arrival of Europeans, the first contacts, and how these encounters set the stage for centuries of transformation, conflict, and the eventual birth of a nation called Venezuela. The year was 1498, and the age of exploration was sweeping across the globe. Christopher Columbus, on his third voyage, sailed along the northern coast of South America and caught sight of what he described as a land of lakes and stilt houses, a vision that would later give the region its name, Venezuela, or Little Venice. But these European explorers were entering lands already rich with cultures, societies, and traditions. Soon after, Spanish expeditions began establishing settlements, searching for gold, and claiming territories for the crown. By 1522, the first permanent Spanish settlement was founded in Coro, along the northwest coast. The colonizers were driven by ambition, religion, and the promise of wealth, but their arrival brought profound disruption to the lives of indigenous peoples. The Spanish imposed their language, religion, and social systems. Indigenous populations were enslaved, forced into labor in mines and plantations, and subjected to diseases like smallpox, which decimated communities that had no immunity. Despite this, many indigenous groups resisted fiercely, defending their territories and maintaining aspects of their culture in secret. Venezuela became part of the Viceroyalty of New Granada, governed from Bogotá. The Spanish divided the territory into provinces, each with its own local administration, while establishing missions to convert the native population to Christianity. Cities like Maracaibo, Caracas, and Valencia emerged, combining Spanish architectural styles with local influences. Economically, the colony relied on agriculture, cattle ranching, and mining. Cocoa, coffee, and sugar plantations flourished, worked largely by enslaved Africans brought to the region. This created a unique blend of cultures, indigenous, African, and European, a mixture that would shape Venezuela's identity for centuries to come. But colonization was not just about building cities and extracting resources, it also set the stage for conflict, both internal and external. Indigenous uprisings, rivalries between Spanish governors, and clashes with pirates in the Caribbean created a turbulent environment. Over time, these pressures would fuel the desire for independence, a dream that simmered quietly under the surface for centuries. In the next part, we will delve into the struggles for independence, the heroes who led them, and how Venezuela transformed from a Spanish colony into a free nation, setting the foundation for its modern identity. By the late 18th and early 19th centuries, the winds of change were blowing across the Americas. Ideas of freedom, equality, and self-determination, inspired by the American and French revolutions, began to reach the hearts of Venezuelans. But this was not a sudden awakening. It had been decades in the making, fueled by the suffering of colonized peoples, the oppression of Spanish rule, and the desire of Creoles, descendants of Europeans born in the Americas, to govern their own land. The struggle for independence officially began in 1810, when a revolutionary movement in Caracas overthrew the local Spanish authorities. This led to the creation of a first Venezuelan republic, a bold experiment in self-rule. But the road to freedom was far from easy. The Spanish crown launched brutal military campaigns to reclaim its colony, resulting in years of devastating conflict, shifting alliances, and repeated defeats for the rebels. Among the most iconic figures of this struggle was Simón Bolívar, a visionary leader who would become known as El Libertador. Bolívar traveled across the continent, uniting forces from Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and Bolivia, fighting for independence not only from Spain, but for the idea of a united South America. His leadership was marked by courage, strategy, and an unshakable belief in liberty, even when facing overwhelming odds. By 1821, after major victories such as the Battle of Carabobo, Venezuela finally secured its independence from Spain. It was a hard-won victory, the result of relentless struggle, sacrifice, and the vision of a people determined to control their own destiny. However, the fight for freedom did not end with independence. Venezuela faced internal conflicts, regional rivalries, and the challenge of building a new nation from the ruins of colonial rule. This period also laid the groundwork for Venezuela's identity, a blend of indigenous heritage, African roots, and European influence, united by the shared experience of struggle and survival. The country that emerged was young, fragile, but full of potential, ready to define its borders, protect its people, and navigate a complex geopolitical landscape. In the next part, we will explore Venezuela's first wars after independence, its borders, and the early conflicts that shaped the nation's political and geographic landscape. After achieving independence in 1821, Venezuela entered a period of political turbulence and regional conflict. The dream of a stable, united nation faced immediate challenges: rival factions, power struggles, and questions over borders with neighboring countries. Initially, Venezuela was part of Gran Colombia, a union with modern-day Colombia, Ecuador, and Panama, led by Simón Bolívar. This union, however, proved fragile. Differences in regional interests and political disagreements led Venezuela to secede in 1830, establishing itself as an independent republic. Defining the nation's borders became a central concern. Venezuela shares borders with 5 countries: Colombia to the west, Brazil to the south, Guyana to the east, and Trinidad and Tobago off the northeast coast, maritime boundary, and Aruba, Curacao, and Bonaire in maritime zones. Disputes with Colombia, and especially Guyana over the Essequibo region, created long-lasting tension that continues to influence diplomacy today. Internally, Venezuela faced frequent civil wars and revolts throughout the 19th century. Political factions known as liberals and conservatives battled for control, often through military confrontations. These conflicts, sometimes called the Federal Wars, lasted decades and caused widespread instability, but they also helped define Venezuela's political culture and the role of the military in national affairs. Despite these challenges, Venezuela gradually solidified its territory. The country spans approximately 916,145 square kilometers, making it the 33rd largest country in the world. Its geography is remarkably diverse. The Andes Mountains in the west, vast plains, llanos in the center, dense Amazon rainforest in the south, and the rich Caribbean coast in the north. This diversity not only shaped the way people lived, but also influenced economic activities like agriculture, cattle ranching, and later, oil production. These early years of independence set the stage for the modern Venezuelan state. They reveal a nation born from struggle, defined by resilience, and constantly negotiating its identity, a land where the echoes of colonialism, revolution, and internal conflict continue to resonate. In the next part, we will explore Venezuela's natural wealth, the discovery of oil, and how this transformed the country into a regional power, setting the stage for the 20th century. While Venezuela's early years were marked by wars and political struggles, the discovery of oil in the early 20th century would change the nation forever. At the beginning of the 1900s, Venezuela was primarily an agricultural and cattle-based economy. But beneath its soil lay one of the richest natural resources on the planet: vast reserves of petroleum. Oil was first discovered in Zulia State, near Lake Maracaibo, in 1914. This discovery quickly transformed the country's economy and global significance. By the 1920s and 1930s, Venezuela had become one of the world's largest oil exporters, attracting international investment and reshaping its society. Cities expanded, infrastructure developed, and wealth poured into the nation, though it was often unevenly distributed. The oil boom also transformed Venezuelan politics. The country shifted from agrarian-based oligarchies to governments increasingly influenced by oil revenues. The discovery created a modern economy, but also dependency on a single resource, planting the seeds for both prosperity and future instability. By mid-century, Venezuela had emerged as one of Latin America's wealthiest nations, often referred to as the Saudi Arabia of the Americas. Oil funded roads, schools, and public services, while urban centers like Caracas grew rapidly, blending modern architecture with cultural traditions. However, the oil wealth also intensified social tensions. Rural populations often saw little benefit, and political factions clashed over control of the resource. Nevertheless, oil became the backbone of Venezuela's economy and a defining element of its identity. The nation had transformed from a colony struggling for independence into a major player on the global stage. This era also saw Venezuela asserting its presence internationally. Its oil reserves gave it influence in regional and global politics, making it a strategic ally for countries dependent on petroleum. But wealth came with challenges: governance, corruption, and the need to balance international interests with national development. The 20th century in Venezuela was a period of transformation, turbulence, and the birth of modern democracy. After decades of dictatorship, military rule, and political instability, the country slowly moved toward more structured governance, reflecting the aspirations of a population shaped by centuries of struggle, colonization, and economic change. In the early 1900s, Juan Vicente Gómez ruled Venezuela with an iron fist from 1908 to 1935, centralizing power and controlling the booming oil industry. While his reign brought some modernization, it also suppressed political freedoms and entrenched social inequalities. After Gómez's death, the country entered a phase of experimentation with democracy, though it was fragile and often interrupted by coups and short-lived governments. By 1945, a significant democratic movement emerged, leading to a brief period known as the Trienio Adeco, when the political party Acción Democrática, Democratic Action, came to power. Universal suffrage, political participation, and social reforms began to reshape Venezuelan society. However, this progress was interrupted in 1948 by a military coup, ushering in years of authoritarian rule once again. It wasn't until 1958 that Venezuela fully embraced democracy with the fall of the dictatorship of Marcos Pérez Jiménez. From this point, the country entered a period of political stability, alternating power peacefully between major parties and implementing reforms aimed at education, health, and infrastructure. This era also saw the rise of social movements demanding land reform, workers' rights, and greater participation in the political process. Despite the democratic progress, Venezuela faced deep-rooted challenges. Inequalities persisted, particularly between urban and rural populations. Oil wealth funded growth, but dependence on a single resource made the economy vulnerable to global price fluctuations, influencing political decisions and social stability. By the late 20th century, Venezuela had become a nation of contrasts. Modern cities with bustling economies, alongside regions still struggling with poverty and limited infrastructure. Social movements, student activism, and grassroots organizations began shaping public discourse, reflecting a society increasingly aware of its rights and responsibilities. Venezuela's history has not only been shaped by internal struggles, but also by its position on the international stage. Its borders, natural resources, and strategic location have led to both cooperation and conflict with neighboring countries throughout its history. Venezuela shares land borders with Colombia, Brazil, and Guyana, and maritime boundaries with the Caribbean islands. Of these, the dispute with Guyana over the Essequibo region has been one of the most enduring. The territory, rich in minerals and potentially oil, was the subject of colonial-era agreements and conflicts, and the disagreement continues into the 21st century. Venezuela claims nearly 62% of the land west of the Essequibo River, while Guyana administers it. International mediation has yet to fully resolve the dispute, making it a key geopolitical issue. Historically, Venezuela also experienced tensions with Colombia, particularly during the 19th century after the breakup of Gran Colombia. Border disputes and regional rivalries occasionally flared into skirmishes, but were generally contained through treaties and diplomacy. During the 20th century, Venezuela positioned itself as a regional power, leveraging its oil wealth to influence Latin American politics. It played a prominent role in organizations like OPEC, using petroleum as both an economic tool and a diplomatic instrument. Venezuela also engaged in multilateral cooperation through the Organization of American States, OAS, and later through initiatives like ALBA, seeking alliances with other Latin American nations. Internally, Venezuela faced social conflicts as well. Disparities in wealth, access to resources, and political representation sometimes sparked protests, revolts, and regional tensions. Oil wealth both funded development and amplified inequality, creating cycles of unrest that echoed into international relations. Venezuela's geography, mountains, rivers, and dense forests, has also influenced its conflicts. Natural barriers protected certain regions while creating challenges for national integration and defense. Its long coastline along the Caribbean has historically exposed the country to piracy, foreign influence, and trade opportunities, shaping the way Venezuelans interacted with the world. Venezuela is a country of astonishing diversity, both in its landscapes and its ecosystems. Covering approximately 916,445 square kilometers, it is the 33rd largest country in the world, and its geography has played a central role in shaping the lives of its people, their culture, and their economy. To the west, the Andes Mountains rise dramatically, providing fertile valleys, cool climates, and rich opportunities for agriculture. These highlands are home to indigenous communities who have maintained traditions for centuries, blending agriculture with unique cultural practices. In the central region lie the llanos, vast tropical grasslands that stretch for hundreds of kilometers. These plains are ideal for cattle ranching and farming, and they have historically been a space of both sustenance and conflict, where cowboys, or llaneros, became symbols of Venezuelan resilience and independence. The south is dominated by the Amazon rainforest and the Guayana Shield, a region of immense biodiversity, rivers, and ancient geological formations. Here lie the legendary Tepuis, flat-topped mountains that inspired Arthur Conan Doyle's The Lost World. This region is also rich in minerals and contributes to the country's natural wealth. Along the north, Venezuela boasts a long Caribbean coastline dotted with islands, beaches, and natural harbors. Cities like Caracas, Maracaibo, and La Guaira developed along these coastal areas, facilitating trade, cultural exchange, and strategic defense. The coast has shaped Venezuelan history through commerce, piracy, and migration. The country's climate varies from tropical along the coast to temperate in the highlands, creating diverse ecosystems that support unique wildlife, including jaguars, capybaras, howler monkeys, and countless bird species. Rivers like the Orinoco and Caroni have been vital for transportation, food, and energy production, shaping settlement patterns for thousands of years. Venezuela's geography also influenced its borders and conflicts. Mountain ranges acted as natural barriers, rivers marked boundaries, and remote forests provided refuge for both indigenous communities and revolutionary forces. Understanding the land is essential to understanding the story of Venezuela, a nation whose people, culture, and economy have always been intertwined with its remarkable natural environment. Today, Venezuela is a nation shaped by thousands of years of history, from its earliest human inhabitants to its modern society. With a population of approximately 28 million people, as of 2025, it is a country rich in cultural diversity, blending indigenous heritage, European influences, and African roots. This mix of peoples has created vibrant traditions in music, food, art, and festivals that are uniquely Venezuelan. Venezuela continues to face significant challenges. Political instability, economic crises, and social issues have affected daily life for many citizens. Yet, despite hardships, the Venezuelan spirit remains resilient. Communities adapt, traditions endure, and a strong sense of national pride persists. The country's economy still relies heavily on oil, but there is also agriculture, mining, and tourism. Venezuelans are increasingly looking toward innovation, local entrepreneurship, and international partnerships to overcome difficulties and secure a stable future. Geographically, the nation remains a treasure trove of natural beauty. The Angel Falls, the world's highest waterfall, the llanos teeming with wildlife, and the Amazon rainforest, still largely untouched, sustaining biodiversity and indigenous communities. These landscapes continue to define the Venezuelan identity and shape the lives of its people. Despite centuries of colonization, independence wars, internal conflicts, and modern challenges, Venezuela endures as a country of resilience, rich culture, and breathtaking landscapes. From the first footsteps of humanity to the bustling cities of today, the story of Venezuela is one of survival, adaptation, and hope, a testament to a nation that has always risen to meet the challenges of its time. As we look to the future, Venezuela continues to write its story, a story of people, land, and culture, forever intertwined, carrying the